Gaming and BS episode 278 being recorded Sunday, January 26th, 2020. Welcome to Gaming and BS, a tabletop RPG podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Sean.
I'm Brett. Welcome to the show, folks. Welcome back. Glad everybody's here. So, Sean,
yes,
we're going to talk about Astonishing Swordsmen Sorcerers of Hyperborea today, as promised. And
Astonishing Swords and Sorcerers of Hyperborea.
And because I don't want to put up with that shit, we brought in Tim Deschene to help us talk more meaningfully about something I'm really fond of.
Tim Deschene!
If Sean acts up too much, I'll threaten his life.
See, that's why you're here. He's gotten numb to my threats. He's like, whatever, Brett.
I can't think of another person I'd rather have me tie in a knot than Tim Deschene.
You know, I was just thinking that I would love to have Brett and I just like fight the entirety of a convention and just see how many people we could take out at once.
I think that would make a great movie. Chop Saki movie.
Actually, what would be kind of what I was thinking about this, that at some point during like GaryCon, we should like creep up on each other and just like tackle each other on the floor just to see if they call security on us.
Scare the hell out of everybody.
What the fuck is going on? I'll be over there tapping out because Tim's got me in some fucked up armbar.
All right. Yeah, man. So we're just going to do the show regular, and then when we get to the main topic, Tim's going to show us the ropes.
So no announcements, nothing too heavy. Let's just do random encounter and bust through this stuff, man.
I did game this weekend.
Did you? I'm so used to not actually partaking.
There isn't a big an announcement necessarily, but Jeff, it was in frickin' prime form, dude.
Was he?
His decibel level, he was out of control, man. Playing his paladin, killing whites.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Over the top.
I can't even. It's not even if I recorded it in audio, it would do no justice.
He's intense when he's there, and he's loud, he's shaking, he's red.
Jeff is a buddy of mine. I've known him for 40-some years. He will, like, when it's his turn to go, and he can never add. Okay, like math.
He's too intense. He doesn't have time for that shit.
There was actually a point where he's like, okay, 16, that's 16 normal damage. All right, raise your ball! And he's like, and whips the dice against my DM screen. Then he's counting again. He's like, all right, 25. I go, so 25 total? No, 25 plus the first number I gave you. What was the first number you gave me? I don't know. I forgot. I'm like, Jeff, it is your job to add up your shit, and it's my job to add up my shit. Oh, I know. And then one of the guys is like, why don't you roll your damage into hit, like kind of all together? And he's like, no, he can't do that.
Too much math, too many moving parts.
So at the end of the game, Jeff says, all right, Sean, so we're going to level up? And I go, Jeff, you guys just took on a swarm, which is like a half CR, your 10th level. Your 10th level, I sent 6 swarms after you that they're a half CR. Half. And you want to level up? Like, that's what you want. Like, you want...
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's like, I want to level up. I said, Jeff, you can't play the character for the level that he is at. You want me to give you another level to confuse the shit out of you even more.
That's just more math, Jeff. Don't do it, Jeff. It's just more math.
Now, in Jeff's defense, he said that the reason he wasn't playing his character properly before and he didn't know the rules is actually he was nerfing himself. So he wasn't playing the other way. Like,
he's so talented that he was handicapping himself to give other people a chance to shine. I like that about Jeff. He's a giver.
Dude,
that's good.
That's a good role player right there.
Damn good role player.
I guarantee, man, if I could get a stream with Jeff in it, like my home group, we would beat Critical Role in views. No question. Because people would show up and go, I got to see this fucking guy play every week. Like, it isn't a little mellow and like, you know, in role play, because he just doesn't do funny voices or anything. But that guy is insane.
Well, he's just intense. Like, overly
totally intense.
That's awesome.
Anyways, I just had to say that.
That's very cool. That is awesome.
But it does this. My conveying of Jeff does no justice at all. Like everybody's just kind of like, I don't get it,
Dude. It's
I'm telling
crazy.
you.
I have a Jeff too. Does every
you?
group have? Yes, and his name's Jeff, and he yes.
Shut up! Isn't your Jeff
Yeah.
too?
Yes.
Same guy, same
We should get
personality.
these guys at the same table, man, and then just the freaking world explodes.
Yeah, Jeff he's something else. That's pretty much all I can say with the time that we have allotted. Maybe one day. Oh, you can meet him at GaryCon. He comes to GaryCon with me every year.
Oh, perfect.
But
I had to have met him before that. I'm
yeah,
guessing.
he's definitely oh man.
I love it.
All right,
And we two have been playing together since we were 13 or so, 14 or something. Yeah.
same thing. Yeah.
That's I know it's cliche, but I love those groups like that. I mean, my group and I have been together for almost 30 years. You start looking back like, wow, I've known that guy since I was 13. And you check your age, you're like, holy shit, I've been around forever.
I'm middle-aged. How did this happen?
Fuck me. That sucks. Yeah, I ran into one of my, at EverCon, Troy Ugritz is one of my first martial arts instructors. He knew me. He was introduced to my wife, and he's a big gamer. And he's there, he's hanging out, and Susan says, Troy, how long have you known Brett? He goes, I knew Brett when he was short and fat. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. I was shorter and a little heavier. He goes, oh yeah, you're a butterball. You're not a butterball now. I'm like, hey, come on, old man. What are you doing? But yeah, I've known him since I was 13. I'm like, holy crap, that's forever ago, man. Anyway, shall we, Sean? Let's move it.
Random encounter. Here we go.
You got to read the first one.
All right. Random encounter, emails, voicemails, comments from social media, forums. First one, Ty writes in via email, no railroading. This is the subject line.
So this is why I'm having Sean read this, because obviously not to him.
Yeah, no, I will not be able to probably relate to this.
He has no idea what this is.
I got a question for you guys. I have a group of new players, but I'm trying not to railroad the group. I'm hoping to show them the freedom they can have in this RPG. But they've come onto a situation where they made a decision, which could cause a TPK. How do you guide the players to not make a foobar without telling them they need to do something different than they are doing right now? I'm not sure if I just did not explain all the possibilities well enough, or they thought, what the hell, let's go for it.
Well, I'll tell you, man, when it's new players, there is, I think sometimes you need to put them in the, the dining car, get them on the rails a little bit and help them along. And they can pull the track switch, if we want to use that analogy, to maybe go different places. But at a certain, I think it helps to give them some kind of guides. Now, my experience, depending on the age of the players and how mature they are with dealing with failing, if you're playing with a bunch of grade schoolers or people that don't like to lose in any way, or I don't know these people, but sometimes people will get a little annoyed if they do actually TPK. And you're like, oh, you didn't bother to warn me. I'm new at this game. Oh my God. So it might not be bad. It's not Deus Ex Machina type of thing where you go down and you swoop in and save them, but it might not be bad to say, all right, just so you know, here's the situation. And you can do it from the character's point of view, saying you're a fighter and fighter. There's 100 hobgoblins and, that's a bad tactical decision type of thing. You could potentially give them the idea, but give it to them as if their characters would know it. And that would help perhaps drive them to, like, you're not saving them. You're giving them info that their characters would know, but they as players don't know. Tim, what would you do?
So my whole thing against railroading is more in the choices in which they want the adventure to go.
Okay.
Right. So, and in that case, if they didn't know where to go, maybe I would give them a nudge in one direction or another. But if it comes down to, like, you kind of give them the warnings and they decide to fight the thing anyway, I don't think I'd TPK them, especially a new group, but I would definitely kick the crap out of them and make it a learning experience.
So, like, if they got 4 people, take 2 down to 0 and let them drag them out of the room type of thing?
Yeah. So this group of middle schoolers and high schoolers who've just started playing that I'm running for, they decided to, like, attack some things that maybe are above their party ability. And I've even had the whole, like, take them prisoner. My bad guys aren't always fighting to kill them. They see the value in having hostages or things of that nature. So, but yeah, definitely, like, I give them the opportunity. Like, our current 5e campaign, I seeded, I think, every single WotC published adventure right now and let them decide which way they wanted to go.
Oh, cool.
And they decided to kind of bite on the Salt Marsh storyline.
Okay.
And right now they're fighting the people on the Ghost, all the pirates and stuff, and the lizardmen, and they got the crap kicked out of them. And we ended on a cliffhanger with like half the party down. And I'm definitely not like looking to TPK them, especially it's hard. In 5e, they're going to get death saves, and if they're all down, I'm probably going to have the bad guys stabilize them and just take them prisoner.
I like that idea because then you're not saving their ass completely. Like, okay, you made this decision, and then whap, whap, whap. Now you guys can run away if you want to.
Yeah,
and sometimes that reminder in the middle of the fight, like you all don't have to stay here. And if the bad guy takes down the cleric, and then a couple lizardmen come out and scoop them up and start walking away with them. Okay. Oh, wait. Oh, shit. That's bad. Oh, crap. Prisoner time. I like that option. And not every fight's to the death on either side. Yep. The bad guy might be like, no, they have information. I want to find out what they know, why they're here, because they may foil my plans or something. I like that. That's a good move.
I'm wondering if Ty has a player in that group that's wiser than the rest, or is on the fence. Then I would slip that player a note and say, if you go down this road, it's going to be a bloodbath, no question.
Kind of again, as a player or a character.
No, I would tell the player character knows in their brain that if they choose that route, it is going to be doom. Like, I wouldn't do that for any other combat unless I knew that they were going down towards a TPK. Because I think sometimes you're going to know we're going down a route that's going to be a shit show. And so they could still do it. They could have the one player character be the conscious, and you can convey it through their avatar in the game. And then when shit hits the fan, it's not like that person didn't tell them.
True. Okay.
Assuming they're willing to do that. Or there is even a person that's like not, yeah, let's all go, yeah, right. Oh, no.
And it's one of those cases where, too, if you do that type of thing and the player's like, you know what? Fuck it. We're rolling the dice, man. We could win or we could go out in the blaze of glory. Blaze of glory! And they want to do it. All right. I gave Tim, you have permission. Whack us all. All right, guys. In you go. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Turn the handle, out comes the meat. So there you go.
Yeah, you don't. Now, one thing about what Ty mentions too is you don't know it's going to be a TPK, right? You're just assuming that the odds are way against the party. You only know it's a TPK until it's done, right? So you're kind of putting the cart before the horse, right?
Because if you've got dice like Sean or I, you could run super freaking cold, and as a game master, you could, The other way to do it is you could always fudge dice if you wanted to, but even if you're playing straight to the numbers, if you're cold, I think all three of us have had that where you're game master, like, I can't hit the players for anything. My bad guys might as well just phone this in. Could have just gave you all experience points and told you to level up, and why waste the hour?
I roll always in the open, which is mostly to my detriment, more often than not. And I think that a lot of times, there are fates worse than death, and failure is just as interesting as success. So A lot of times, like DMs and GMs want to coddle their players and kind of let them always win the fight, but that's not always interesting. Sometimes losing the fight and like kind of licking your wounds and coming back. Like I am vehemently against railroading when it comes to letting them make the decision of where they want to go. But once they make that decision, the consequences are theirs.
Yeah, and if you said with a new party, if there's 4 players in it, you beat the ever living shit out of them. There's like 1.5 characters left standing at the end of this fight. Like, oh, that was close. Chances are they're not going to be quite as gung ho next time, because that will be a fresh memory in their minds for next turn.
Yes,
cool, good stuff. Thank you, Ty. I hope we answered that one. If not, or if anybody else has a better / different idea, let us know.
Yeah, let us know if you TPK him, Ty.
Yeah, and if you do, we'll give you a button. I'm kidding. I don't have a DPK button. We got to make one. Anyway, Laramie comments on the Sean encounter. First, I think you did a great job, Sean. Better than I would have. And of course, having said that, here come my comments. As far as tracking which monsters have how many HPs, if it's a flurried or hurried combat, I do tend to let them be random unless someone makes a point of focusing fire. We're talking about who gets hit. Both ways, from the monster attacks and the party ones. In my experience, it keeps people from getting too bogged down. Just swing and go. Also, if you feel a combat is going one way or the other, you can spread the damage or focus it instead of random to help the flow of the game. I'm not going to fudge die rolls, but I think this can help one side being cleanly wiped. but I think your overall straight up nailed it. That encounter was built to suck hit points, and it did. So, Tim, I don't know if you listened to this one, but Sean had this encounter in A Tomb of Annihilation. It's this wacky-ass maze / undead minotaurs come out of the woodwork and start wailing the crap out of the party. And this kind of goes into Ty's comment about TPK when we're chatting through, like, okay, even if you're doing Theater of the Mind and you have like 5 undead minotaurs charging your party and the characters are wailing on undead minotaurs, unless they're telling you sometimes, like, I keep hitting the same one that hit Tim's character, I keep doing this thing to this one, I have a tendency to spread the damage out, like Laramie's talking, or I have in the past, to kind of keep things smooth for my own bookkeeping. When, okay, you all happen to hit the same one, it's dead, or whatever the case is, just to kind of keep the bookkeeping simple. So, Sean, does that make sense to you? What Laramie's laying out there?
Yeah, I think the just pick random bad guys to assign hit points to unless they genuinely want to hit a specific one. But yeah, I think you get too orderly sometimes as a DM, and I don't think you need to.
My players definitely, I don't know if it's just because I conditioned them to, they usually tell me which one they're attacking. They have a tendency to kind of focus fire on one and try and do they'll take one out at a time.
It's smart.
If they don't do that, if someone they kind of get whatever, I might just either randomly pick one or be nice to them and be like, well, this one's almost dead, so I'll pick that one, and get rid of it. It wasn't until I actually played AD&D for the first time, and I went backwards. I had started off playing BX and went right to 2nd edition, never played 8. And I never knew that in AD&D it was kind of a rule where, it's just you hit random things. There's no kind of picking your target, and that kind of blew my mind. Because my players, and I've always done that, you kind of try and you have tactics of who you're going to attack and who you're going to wail on first.
Yeah, especially, I know that that's a thing in first ed, but I never played with it. When I finally realized, oh yeah, that's supposed to help simulate the fast, furious, kind of crazy ass nature of
fog of war type stuff.
Yeah, and there's 17 guys all with swords wailing on each other. Hard to say who hit who first or who gets bumped into whatever. So interesting, good stuff, Laramie. All right, man. Sean, want to read the next one?
Joshua 220 poses a question on the forums. So this is a potential future topic.
All right, making notes.
Do useless player characters exist? Tim?
I think the old man, the grump in me wants to be like, no, you could make any character work. But I mean, and it's true. Is it always fun?
Little camper, you can do it.
Is it always fun? No. But I get that. So
I'm going to play an 80-year-old wizard with 2 hit points.
Yeah, you have to be a masochist for certain things.
Very true.
You play the DCC funnel and your character obviously has a high intelligence and a 4 strength, and I'm going to pick the fighter because that's,
right. Because why not?
Yeah. I mean, just to be kind of countercultural type thing, like punk rock, yeah, man, I'm the 4 strength fighter.
Yeah,
middle finger to you guys.
And that's actually one of the reasons why I'll let Sean finish reading this in a second, but that's one of the reasons why I've had friends of mine even hate the 3d6 down the line for stats.
Vicky did that. Jeff's wife did that. So I killed her last character, the last session. So she was going to roll it up. And one of the guys was like, hey, roll down the line or roll up 46, pick top 3. So she did. I said, you do that, I'll give you a point of inspiration.
So there are certain games, I think, also being a big DCC player and a big BX guy, there are games that 3d6 down the line won't matter as much because the attribute scores don't really matter as much as they do. And you do that in 5e, you're kind of hardcore because the attribute scores matter a whole bunch.
Yeah, because those attribute bonuses, that helps you spot hidden, helps you, steal things, helps you climb, helps you spot, search, all your knowledge rolls, all that shit plays into it.
We're going to, since we're talking about Hyperborea tonight, I don't do that for my Hyperborea games because a lot of the character classes have prerequisites. You need certain ability scores to beat them. So, if I'm going to let my players play whatever they want, then they need to be able to have the ability scores to meet those requirements.
Makes sense. All right, Sean, you want to finish reading up?
If so,
or do you want to hang on? Do you want to read this one?
We
or
could
do
read
wanna
it and
hold
then we could elaborate later.
All right, we'll elaborate later. You read it. Read it.
If so, is it the player's fault, GM's fault, or the system's fault?
Ooh,
No, it's probably the player's fault. Let's just blame the player.
I like that.
Is it a player's job to build a viable character for a setting? The GM's job to communicate what classes or skills will be relevant and which will not, or modify encounters to fit the characters. The system's job to make sure irrelevant characters... Question. The system's job to make sure irrelevant characters can't be built? A little bit of everything? How often do you think players claim their character is useless actually have viable characters and just aren't playing to their strengths? Or perhaps another player has a game-breaking build and hogs the spotlight. As a game master, I've had players mention to me that they believe their character wasn't good for adventuring. I've resolved it in a few ways. One player fell out because their low perception meant they would miss things their companions caught. I told them that they should visit a doctor next session and gave them glasses that would give them a boost to any checks using sight, which got them what they wanted with an in-game explanation. Another time I had a player that built a tank of a character with high unarmed skills, but felt that he couldn't dish out enough damage because everyone else had guns. Duh, of course guns hit harder than fists. For that player, I just let him respec the character by moving their skill points around. How would you have handled these situations? I'll bet one of you would have just said, tough luck. We'll keep that a mystery. As a player, I built 2 characters in Call of Cthulhu to play through Massive Nyarlathotep and felt that both of them were pretty useless, even though they were interesting characters. One was a British pilot with a storied past, and the other was a New York University adjunct professor. However, due to there being 70-plus skills and having never played the game, by the end of the first act, I felt like I misspent my points at creation on useless skills, namely science ones for the professor like meteorology. I wish either the GM or the book had stepped in and said, listen, unless you're fighting the weather god, don't take the skill because you'll never use it. Should my GM have protested, or is Call of Cthulhu a bad system with too many skills? Because I know it wasn't my fault I ended up with useless characters. Looking for input from Brett and Sean on this one.
So I'm going to jump at the Call of Cthulhu one right now. In my experience, what I do in any system that has a lot of different skills like that, when a player says, hey, I want to make this character, I'm like, okay, you do realize this is Call of Cthulhu and you're not fighting the weather god. Oh, what? Shit. Especially if they've never played before.
How do they know that? They could
be.
be.
I'm just saying, if they've never played before, I'm like, let me look your character over. Let me lend a hand here because it can be fairly complicated with 70-plus skills.
Okay.
If it's one of the old guard in my group, I'm like, y'all want to do that? I assume you're taking a challenge on. Yes, Sean.
Then I would say it's up to you to say, don't take that skill because you're not going to have it. Or you are, or the vice versa, I should say. Hey, there's a meteorology issue. Somebody better have meteorology.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could do that.
But I think it always goes one way, right?
Well, it can. Yeah. I don't know. We could get into it a little bit more.
Yeah,
Tim, do you have any thoughts off the top?
I got a point here.
So I think way back, like all of his scenarios have valid, right? Like it can be the system's fault. It can be the GM's fault and the player's fault. There are a lot of times I think people say that player's unplayable, the character's unplayable, and they're really not, right? They're just they're mad that their character can't do everything.
Yeah, I've seen that plenty of times.
But then there are times that, like maybe you didn't listen to the GM, or the GM was delinquent in telling you what the kind of focus of the game is. So like if you want to play a meteorologist, it's because you really wanted to play one, right? And then you can't be upset that your meteorology isn't helping in the adventure, or your GM was just was an ass and didn't say, dude, this guy's going to be like, you're doing this for the role playing reasons. Like you're not going to be able to your skills are not going to apply to what we're doing.
It's the classic, Sea King's Malice by Alex Kammerer. Like, oh, Sea King, oceans, water, boats. None of y'all took swimming? Really? I fucking told you at the beginning this is your entire thing is a land-based druid. You sure about that? Type of thing.
Yeah.
A little bit of blame all around potentially there.
Yeah. The one thing I've tried to do, and I think I got this more from when I started to read Blades in the Dark and ran that a couple of times, was that let the players tell you how they're tackling a situation. So instead of giving them like, roll this, if they have a multitude of skills that might be able to help in a situation, they can kind of tell you how they're doing it. And if it makes sense, they're not reaching too far. They can pick whatever skill that you might not think is, something that could work in the situation, but it does because of the explanation. They get to roll that instead.
That's a good idea. I actually do something similar when I run Avalon with 5e. If my example has always been, if you run down a corridor, you're chasing a thief, you run down an alleyway and he's gone. And you're like, well, I guess I could try search. I'm like, well, what are you doing? What are you trying to find out? I want to know if he climbed the wall. You have expertise in climbing or acrobatics because look at your character sheet. I'm proficient in this. Okay. You could use your, acrobatics to see, did the dude parkour up this wall here? Oh, I could do, yeah, absolutely. You could use that to help investigate. You could use that potentially to pull stuff together. Where somebody who has no idea would have to rely on a raw perception check where you have proficiency in a thing, so I'll give you advantage or something along those lines. But letting them play to that character who doesn't have a really good perception because he doesn't have really high wisdom or whatever, but he's, whiz-bang, climber or athletic dude, he or she walks up there and she's like, oh, yeah, I can see the chalk marks over here. I can see where they stepped on this. They disturbed that windowsill. They climbed the wall. Off we go. So similar type of thing. I like doing that more and more. I think even with a game like Call of Cthulhu, a huge list of skills, getting the players to tell you using that type of wisdom, saying, hey, tell me what it is you're trying to do. How are you trying to use the skills that you're good at to figure this out? I like that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, every time I've run Tomb of Annihilation, man, these guys are like, all right, I look around. Great. Yeah, okay. I actually have to actually ask them, what are you trying to achieve? Like, by what you're saying, what are you hoping to find, or what are you trying to achieve? And then they go, well, I'm trying to determine X. Oh, okay. Then I understand.
Give me an Arcana roll. Give me this roll.
But man, it is so like high 100-foot level sometimes. It's like, come on, you gotta come down to earth a bit.
I think there's like a thing with modern game design that makes people, even who've been playing for a long time, look at their character sheet for the answer, right? Or they're like, I look around, that means I get to roll something, and that's going to expose rather than being like, no, immerse yourself in what's happening in the game, describe to live. Like, what are you looking at? And if you describe it well enough, I'm not even going to make you make a roll, right? Like, if you look behind where the secret door is, well, then your character finds it.
Yeah, in a game with, if I look at like 5e, I'm like, oh, you have proficiency in that? I'll just give it to you.
Yeah.
You're totally proficient in, athletics. Yeah, you can see where the guy climbed the wall. You don't need to check. You're the god queen of acrobatics. Why would she not know how to do that? Obviously, someone climbed the wall. Yeah, I like it.
Good stuff. Brett, you got the next one?
Yes, I do. Spook408 on the forums wants to know about rules that encourage role-playing. Good God, we got some interesting stuff here. What's the best rule mechanic to encourage role-playing? As I posted on another thread, I wanted to play the Genesis system to see how their narrative dice system works. Champions has ideas like disadvantages. Fate has aspects. Then there are all the bennies, inspirations, fate points sort of encouragements. Certain settings do this with tailored rules. The Bond game had the seduction skill broken up by steps, like the look, opening line, etc. That's about all I can come up with, but there must be some more, right? Holy shit, dude.
Okay, so let me just comment here, because first of all, Brett read that, and it has nothing to do with Brett, okay? Because Brett doesn't need rules for any of this stuff. Nothing. He doesn't need any rules for roleplay. Right, Brett?
Of course not.
Right. So I'll have to get somebody else for that show and that topic, because Brett will be just like, well, Genesis, you roll dice and have like a pass-fail plus an advantage-disadvantage kind of thing. But I could always do that in my games. Like, I could just do that normally. I don't need a rule.
I've said this before.
Yes, you have.
Is that depending who you're gaming with, some people are like, oh, certain gamers do certain things naturally. Other gamers do not. Most people who design a game or setting are not playing for people who do shit naturally anymore. Because I need a system that's going to inform play so that people play it quote unquote right, or that it fits a certain flow or style or whatever. I get that. I will, as Sean's he's laughing at me now, but totally. There's certain points if I was playing and I'm like, oh, I'll play my character and I'll just role play my way through it. I don't and someone goes, oh, you get a Benny for that. I'm like, whatever. Neat, I guess. I get an inspiration for playing my character. Neat, I guess. It's just a thing you do. But you get newer players coming in. Tim's talking about these younger kids he's playing with and so forth. How do you encourage them to do that? You handing out inspiration, you give out advantage. If you have bennies and so forth, I totally get where that Pavlovian, I did a thing, clink, I get a reward for it, helps to encourage that. I think there's some sense to that. Do I need it for certain groups I run for? Nah. But I could definitely see where it's handy for people to have. Tim, what do you think?
I think a lot of people have, or everyone has a different play style, and you can never force someone to be a good role player. Or
what? Yes, you
no.
can. Yes, you can, Tim.
Absolutely not. You can't.
Damn it.
I think a lot of these systems that encourage, quote unquote, encourage role playing are more punitive to people who are never going to be that person. So you end up kind of like rewarding the people who sometimes I want them to shut up anyway. Like I don't want to hear their soliloquy and their funny Scottish dwarf voice anymore. Whereas the person who just kind of wants to figure out puzzles and maybe roll some dice and fight stuff are being kind of left behind because that's what they're getting out of the game. Like with my young group, I think they have learned a little bit just by watching when I DM, like, yeah, man, I'm like totally into this and I'm going to like do stupid voices, or every NPC is going to have a different personality. And it encourages them to bring up personality for their characters. But I think sometimes like rewarding it in game can like backfire somewhat. I don't know. Like I've never seen a system that I really think is great.
You know what's interesting too is that, I mean, to really attack that is like, what sounds kind of pedantic, but like, what do we mean by role playing, right? Do we mean role playing as in you're taking on a role and acting or speaking in a voice or speaking as character? Or do you mean behaving as your character would? Because there are plenty of people who are really good role players that are third person narrative. Ragnar the fighter, my character does this. Why is he doing that? Well, his family was killed by orcs. He sees these orcs, therefore he knows a lot about them, and that's why he's doing this behavior right now. And some people would say that's really good role playing. You could potentially say here's an inspiration point. Here's a Benny for you too.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times what you're saying, Tim, it makes sense to me because a lot of people are like, oh, role playing means all the stuff you just defined. And then the person who's really quiet narrates in third person, doesn't feel that they're as gregarious. They're not like, oh my God, I'm not doing all the cool actor stuff, so therefore I'm getting punished. So I kind of want to go back at Spook 408 and say, okay, how would you do? What type of role playing you're trying to get? You're trying to get just to get people to do what we said? How are you trying to accomplish a thing? Because that person who's really quiet says, well, what I'm trying to do is determine if somebody climbed up the alleyway. I'm trying to figure out if this alchemist used quicksilver, and I'm trying to do that by looking at all their lembecs, and the different mortars and pestles and so forth. Oh, says Tim, boom, you got something going there. And that person may not be like in your face, classic bard charisma face man type of dude, but she may be rocking it that other way. So I don't know.
I think the one thing about this one is when you talk about Genesis system and then you talk about the bond game with the seduction skill, I think there's two different things at play here. You have the mechanic resolution, okay, whatever that is. And the mechanic resolution for a majority of traditional games usually is around a combat kind of thing. So D&D doesn't have it hasn't never had a really great social mechanic. And with the social mechanic, I think that comes into role-playing. Because nobody really role-plays combat. I mean, some do. Some would say, I make quips while I'm beating up people or whatever. That's my role-playing. But really, you get so pulled out of the game. You roll your initiative. You tell the game master what you're going to do. You roll some dice. You tell them the results. They say, okay, great. The role play of that's going to be less limited than a social interaction-based encounter in general. There's going to be people, no, not always. Yeah, well, in general. All right, so come on, work with me here. But, going back to the bond thing or the social piece, that's where I think it's like, because the Genesis system, it's not going to be role-playing. It's still a mechanic. It's still do you succeed, do you not succeed? And then there's a fallback or a not a fallback. It's not going to allow me to role-play better or not. Like, even though it's somewhat narrative, you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the Genesis system, because it's like the Star Wars game that you ran for me, Sean, it will help potentially narrate better, but not necessarily roleplay better.
Correct.
Tim, do you agree with what Sean and I are saying, or do you think we're fucking crazy, or what are you thinking?
So last night we played Eric Bloat's Blackest of Deaths, which is a kind of old school D&D hack, and it has a die mechanic that has like kind of a narrative die. It's kind of like you just roll a d6 with any of your checks, and if the d6 comes up with a 1, you might succeed or fail worse, and then if it comes up with a 6, you either fail better and it's up to the player character to narrate, or the player to narrate what their character's doing.
Okay, a little narrative aid.
Yeah, and some people have a really easy time with that. Come up with really cool, interesting things that aren't always the same thing, and then some people are just not. They're going to have to kind of fall back on their. I think it's a muscle, man. You just have to like practice it, and there are times that. I remember when I was first starting gaming, I wasn't a great role player by any means. I was a murder hobo, man. I just wanted to kill stuff and just get loot and make my character powerful. And
yeah, we were like 13.
Yeah,
that's what we did when back then.
And I don't think it was
1,000 gold pieces. I put them in my pocket.
Yeah, and we learned to be good role players even in D&D. Like even though second edition, it doesn't have narrative or social mechanics. It only has rules to adjudicate fights pretty much. But we would get into our characters, man, and it sucked when they died. We didn't have the whole there's no plot armor.
Yeah, exactly.
But if your character lived and you just really get it. And I agree with what Brett, just playing your character and immersing yourself in what would my character do. And not in that jerk way of I'm going to be mean to your character because that's what my character would do type stuff. But how would my character react in the situation? And even though maybe I don't think this is the best thing, this is why I love playing paladins, because I am not that black and white, but I love navigating the moral maze of trying to have that ethos, while also not being a dick to all the other players and their characters. I would say I do play a good paladin because I don't take it out in the party.
That's good. The party thief does not get 50 lashes every evening just to make you feel better.
But yeah, I think it's everything can be learned. I don't know if mechanics would ever force it. I just think it's just something that you just have to do more and more and more and more.
I love what you're saying there, Tim, because Matt Colville said this and other people said it too. I think Sean and I have said it repeatedly. You've got to play more to get better at it. So you practice jiu-jitsu, I practice taekwondo, I've done aikido for 5-6 years. You have to continue to do the thing to be good at it. This is all a perishable skill. You have to, people that I know who do stage acting or voice acting or any type of thing, you have to continue to do it to get better and better and better. And sometimes you're doing something, you're in a comfort zone, what I'm going to do? I'm going to play a druid. Never played this before. I'm going in. I'm going to play a druid. You know what I've never done? Never played a Jedi before. Fuck it. I'm a Jedi tonight. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to dive in and try this thing. And you could totally suck. And, it's a safe environment if you're playing with good people. And, oh, shit, I didn't play my thief right. I didn't play the horrible gangster dude just perfect or whatever. But you've got to practice this stuff. And I think and I'm not saying anybody's saying this out there, but if you look at a mechanic and say, oh, this will encourage role playing, or this is, better role playing in 5 easy steps. I don't think there's a really good shortcut to it. There's not a lot. There's certain games may sing to you as a player or a game master better and may help you come along. Believe it or not, the original Vampire the Masquerade was this breakout game for my gaming because of whatever reason, it really grabbed me and I was in, and I got better at role playing and defining plots and all this really cool shit. I still to this day don't necessarily know what magic was in that weird ass book, but it caught me. If you find a thing, you're oh, it's obviously these rules or whatever. I don't know, man, because if it was, everybody doing it. It's so subjective, and I think you're right, Tim. I can't say this mechanic, boom, you implement this fucker, and everybody's going to be a rock star role player at your table. I don't think that such a thing exists. Got to practice.
All right.
Shall we?
Yeah, thanks everybody for writing in, commenting. Appreciate it. Let's get into the main topic where Tim can talk more.
I think I've talked a whole bunch.
You need to talk more, man. Just imagine, now I get to sit back and not say anything.
This is the best part because Sean's going to stop talking. So we're going to talk about.
Ouch.
We're talking about Astonishing Swordsmen Sorcerers of Hyperborea. I brought this up on the show a few times, how I like the setting, I like the system. Sean can't stand it because it's descending armor class.
It does? I don't even know that. So I didn't know that.
Yeah, you did. I've told you that before.
What?
You have a mental block on descending armor class.
Look, man, I can't remember jack shit. My wife thinks I got early Alzheimer's, so there. It's a medical condition, Brett.
Now, your wife says you don't listen to some other stuff she was talking about.
Anyways, ascending, descending armor class, that's whatever.
But anyway, I have yet to get the game to the table. I've read the rules a number of times. I've read like Rats on the Walls, there's one the one serpent out in the there's one with a serpent that like this big lizard that cries gems and shit.
Oh yeah,
I can't remember. The charnel something.
The charnel cryptid.
Yeah, I can't remember. It's on my shelf over there. Anyway, there's some really cool adventures. I've read through it. It has wonderful OSR feel. But Tim has actually played the damn thing and loves this setting and the system and so forth. So I want to get in somebody here so it's not like, oh, Brett says this sounds really cool, but he's never done it. So, Tim, if I were to say, Astonishing Swordsmen Sorcerers of Hyperborea, what is it? Is there a pitch that you tell people when someone goes, what the fuck is that game? Do you have an elevator pitch of your own? If you don't, you don't. That's fine. I'm just
I kind of do. Well, first thing I tell people is it's my favorite version of D&D.
Nice.
Because at its core, it is still D&D.
Yes.
Which version of
D&D? Yeah.
So it's an amalgam between, there's a lot of it that reminds me of second edition actually, which is like the one I played the most, right? And it reminds me of second edition because it has the AD&D roots, but it's better organized, right? So that's where 2E comes in. But there's also a lot of BX in it. So it's got it's kind of almost like a best of early D&D stuff with Jeff's own. Jeff Talanian's kind of like, I think it's mostly his house rules, things that he liked to do that ended up making sense and just being good design. So it's a human-centric sword and sorcery, kind of weird tales version of D&D, not high fantasy, not Tolkien style, more Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, Lovecraft in a D&D kind of milieu.
I've told people like when I say it's like Robert E. Howard Conan, they say, "Oh, that's regular D&D." Like, no, hang on, that you haven't read the books. So have you read Lovecraft or Clark Ashton Smith? Like, oh, kind of. And then there's a phrase I think it's still in the intro. One of the folks who did a introduction to it, they call it, instead of Dungeons and Dragons, it's Dungeons and Elder Things.
Yeah,
because you have Migo from the Lovecraft mythology. The whole Cthulhu mythos is involved in it. And I think one of the interesting pieces, as you said, it's human-centric in that there's different versions of human. But if you say, oh, I like playing elves, no. Oh, I really want to be a halfling, no.
The cool thing about the game is, though, you can use it. I've used it just to run regular style D&D. Like the first time I actually ran Hyperborea, I don't think I ran like a Hyperborea-centric game. I ran Barrow Maze and just used the Hyperborea rules because I like the way they're presented. They're just really tight, and the character classes are interesting. They're kind of like, if I could make the perfect fighter, how would I make it? Or if I could make a thief the way I really wanted to make it. And that's kind of what Jeff's done. So even the core 4 classes of like the cleric, mage, the wizard, thief and fighter are really, really the best versions of them, I think, from what looked to be like an early D&D set.
They're really good. And the other thing that Jeff Talanian, the author, did to it that I really liked was the subclasses. Your ranger, your barbarian, your druid, your necromancer. As he breaks that stuff out, they're all, I feel like they're, when I read that, like first edition AD&D, like the thief acrobat in Unearthed Arcana felt like this kind of wonky ass add-on. Never even like the assassin from first edition AD&D because it didn't feel right.
Yeah.
But every one of these, they from your perspective, to use your words, I think they're really tight.
Yeah.
I think they all make sense, and there's not, from a niche protection perspective, like if you're the barbarian and someone else is the ranger, you're two distinct enough classes with distinct enough things. You don't feel like there's a lot of bleed.
Yeah. And all the character classes have their own experience point charts, like old school games. So that kind of helps balance them. Like maybe some character classes are more powerful up front than others, but then those other classes have a faster experience point kind of advancement chart. or and then it's kind of like that whole linear fighter quadratic wizard type thing where like the wizard, actually I would say like the first level wizards in this game though are not as bad. If you're the type of person that hates playing an early on wizard, his magician classes are a little bit more robust because they get extra hit points from their familiars and extra spells and things like that.
Yeah, you don't have that, oh my god, I do have 2 hit point wizard and I get hit by a rock and I'm dead.
Yeah.
You don't really make that wizard in this game.
No, yeah, they start off still pretty capable. And it's just I think that he doesn't have he's not so preoccupied with balance. Like the character classes are pretty, I would say, are balanced, but there are some that are just better than others, and that's why some of the character classes have attribute requirements or things of that nature. Like this dude he's probably better than being a regular fighter, but you also have to have like all these different requirements to hit.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned that in the kind of the preamble in the as we talked earlier, but with having the different requirements, that is kind of an old school approach, like the first edition touch, where if you don't have the 13 charisma, 12 strength, or whatever it is, you're not allowed to be that class. So yeah, that makes sense in that from a balance perspective, trying to tweak it. The other thing I think from a balance piece is when the creatures, the encounters and so forth, it doesn't have a CR rating or anything like that. It's like if that old school approach of sometimes you got to run away, you got to be smart. If you can't figure this out, you got to go. You can get in over your head if you're not careful. There's cautious combats make sense.
Yes.
Taking care of stuff. It's not like 10-foot pole every 5 inches down the dungeon floor. It doesn't feel crazy that way, but you still need to play smart in that space. And there's no it's been a while since I've read, but you don't have it's not like Call of Cthulhu where you have a 60 or 70 different skills to check against. A class has a power like a tracking or something along those lines. But
yes. Most of the classes have their abilities available at first level, and then they just get better at them, like old school D&D. Like if you're a tracker and you have your thief skills or whatever, and then any kind of like secondary skills that we see nowadays in the skill bloat games, it's just your character has a background that they had before becoming an adventurer, and if it's something that makes sense that your character could do, they probably have a better chance in D6 or D12 to do that thing, versus not having a reason why they'd be good at it type. So there aren't really like hard skills to say except for the thief skills.
Yep. So we've talked human centric. It's like dungeon elder things. There's straight from the Clark Ashton Smith stuff. There's if you read some of the earlier works that he has, it's kind of the gods, all the stuff that's in there. It's like Cthulhu's in there and
Sethakwa, which is a big callback.
Yep, big callback to that.
The city-state of Cromarium, which is like Cromorium from a lot of his stories, which is like a kind of like a Lankmarish, that city, like a little more advanced but dark and dingy, and thieves guilds running stuff. And
one of the other cool things I thought about when you think about the setting as a whole, it's basically a great big island / continent at Hyperborea, the Borealis, right? It's the Hyperborea.
Yeah, beyond the North Wind.
Yeah, beyond the North Winds. And that's where this thing is. It's like in this place out of time, out of space. And I've talked to a number of people who've played it and they're like, yeah, I have taken my second edition game and transported the characters there. They went through a portal and they ended up in Hyperborea. They went from a first edition thing, they went through a deal and boom, you ended up here.
Yeah.
So he's got a wonderful map, and because it's a finite space, and you have this really cool, like on the edges of it, you can't get past it because of the magical winds and so forth. If you're trying to figure out if you were transported there, how the hell do you get back? Could be a whole adventure series, but it's this wonderful, in my opinion, encapsulated space where everything, you don't feel like it's as big as Greyhawk or the Forgotten Realms or some of that huge like countryside. You feel like you could tackle it.
Yeah.
It feels like it's a digestible setting.
I think he also too, in the Gazetteer portion of the book, which to talk about the book itself, it has like that there's the core book, which has the player's book, the DM's kind of stuff, the monster manual, the Gazetteer, thing like that. And then you have just a player's guide, which is much cheaper, soft cover, just has the player facing things. But even in the Gazetteer, there's lots of empty space for you as a DM to like put stuff in. And then he also has some very wonderfully evocative defined cities or places that you can be like, yeah, we're going to adventure here next, and you can kind of make your way around it. If you want to do a pirate game, cool. There's like seas all around. If you want to do, typical dungeon crawling, awesome.
There's plenty of that old school weirdness, and it's not DCC Gonzo weirdness. When I think of DCC weirdness, sometimes, at least the people I talk to, like, oh, it's crazy, it's Gonzo. A lot of people I knew who love the weirdness in DCC crank that fucker to 11. This one does have, because it's this kind of a dumping ground, the Hyperborea, this land, this encapsulated space beyond the North Wind, it brings things in. And you have this feeling of like lost ages and stuff has just landed here. So there are ray guns, right?
Yeah. So I know this is Sean's least favorite thing, but there is a healthy amount of, if you want to, I mean, obviously, Sean, any kind of game, you can eliminate that stuff if you don't want to put it in your game. But there is in the baked in setting, there is a healthy amount of sci-fi blended in with your fantasy. So the Atlanteans obviously are like a kind of a lost, dying race that were super scientific before their society fell. So you might find like some Atlantean, laser ray gun or, flamethrower or flying car or something like that. And some of the published adventures do have those things in there. You can find them. And they're obviously in the core book.
But it's not Gonzo, and by that I mean it's not so in your face. You feel like if you have a 10th level fighter and a barbarian, if you don't have a ray gun, you're doing it wrong. You don't have that feeling. It feels like it's this weird, rare thing you uncovered somehow. Like, holy fuck, I have this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is the blend of like any time that super science and magic are kind of indistinguishable to an early civilization. So, yeah, it's something special to find, but it's not something that you're going to be able to like hold on to forever. They're artifacts and relics of a lost age type thing.
No, one of the things that you talked about kind of off the mic share, and we had notes here, it's a Weird Tales Appendix N as influence, but not self-referential. When you say that, Tim, what do you mean by that?
So when you look at D&D, as the editions went on, they began to reference the earlier edition. So anything that was like lore for elves or lore for dwarves, it built upon what they had said in previous editions, and it's hard to reference those things and kind of get further and further away from the source kind of literature.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, if you think about Bigby, Mordenkainen, the spells with certain names to them become kind of canon, and then you're referencing, oh, it's Bigby's thing, or it's Mordenkainen's whatever. Where's he from? Oh, he's from Greyhawk, and therefore, yeah. And Vecna, the names, all that stuff, yeah.
It's one of those things that it's the same as DCC, where they both, and this is why I love both of the games, like you're trying to asking me like, which of my children do I love best? But they're two sides of the same coin for me, whereas they both, they're love letters to the Appendix N and to Weird Tales and the fiction that really made D&D what it was to begin with, and kind of keeping that sentimentality versus like worrying about like what are the 5 editions worth of lore that elves follow, based on D&D lore.
Yeah, so I mean, just from an editions perspective, when this Astonishing Swordsmen first came out as a box set, spiral bound books in it. I have 2 copies of those. I got one that Corey Wynn was wonderful enough. He got me one, and then he got Jeff Talanian to sign the inside cover, which is really cool. So that's on my shelf. I got another one. It's been like a multiple read through, hopefully a play copy someday. And then he put out essentially like a second edition. He kickstarted it.
Yep.
Jeff did, and it's bigger and heftier than a Dungeon Crawl Classics book. It's actually thicker.
Yeah,
it's a meaty fucker. But I'll tell you, man, it's really. It's all in one. You get this book, you're done.
Yeah, it's a one-stop shop. And I think one of the things that people are surprised at when they maybe go to the booth, they're like, oh, this is kind of pricey. But when you think about the fact that, well, you're getting everything you need to run the game in one volume, and it's good quality, yeah, it's naturally not that expensive when you think of it.
Versus, your D&D books, if you happen to pay cover price, what are you, $150 in?
Yeah, to get the same stuff, yeah.
Yeah. I like that. That is kind of cool where it's not self-referential. Its gazetteer, its setting is really handy. So I shouldn't say really handy, but I love the fact that I can use it in multiple ways. When I read it, I'm like, oh, I could transport people here, which I think would be kind of a cool way to intro people into it, because then everything here is weird and they'll be shocked and disoriented and act accordingly. Then they'll learn about the setting and so forth. You said you've run it with just the system. What is it about the system that makes you think that it's your favorite version of D&D?
So I love, like we were talking about the classes. I think the classes are just really well done, really tight. They're fun to play. I don't think anyone ever feels like they're useless at the table, regardless of what class they pick. I like that the race, depending on what race of man you pick, are mostly role playing. You're not going to get any benefits, for being a Viking versus being like an Amazonian, but it's all just role playing flavor. And so some of the advanced stuff, like the advanced combat options, if you choose to use them, are fun. Instead of just like rolling to hit every time, you can choose to like do different, whether you're shield bashing or doing a shield wall or doing like, shield and spear type stuff. You can kind of make a character that kind of fits a certain genre that you want to play. What else about it that makes me want to play it versus it's easy to run. I really do love the initiative system. It's one of the things that people get freaked out about because it's side initiative, but there are 2 phases. And I think the way I think about it is it's kind of like how AD&D had like remember how like AD&D had they didn't call them, but they weren't phases, but they were
segments.
Yeah, the segments. It's not as in depth or as hard to grok as that stuff.
So if we're doing it, how would you?
So
how do you do initiative?
All right. So let's say you're my player and I'm the DM, and we both roll D6, and you roll for the whole all your player characters. I'm rolling for the monsters, and let's say I win, right? But my monsters have to run more than what half their movement rate or whatever to get to you, and you're standing there with a bow ready. Even though you won or you lost initiative, you could still shoot my dudes with a bow as they're running at you. So there are phases. They're like, if you can't finish this in phase 1, then the other side gets to do their phase 1 action, which would be you standing still and shooting. And for some reason, it freaks people out. They think it's like really way more difficult than it is, but it's not. It's just more than, and it's usually only the first round of combat as like forces are clashing.
Yeah, because you're at a distance, and either you stay at distance or try to stay in. One side tries to stay and close, or just pure close. Yeah, I get it. Okay. Yeah,
and it allows for a little bit of tactical. Like I never really play grids with it, but there is a little bit like tactical. Like, hey, let's make a shield wall and stab dudes through the second ranks and use their spears and things like that. Because there's weapon length and that kind of stuff.
So when you're doing this, you're saying you don't often use a grid. You find it plays the theater of the mind experience with it works really well.
Yeah, very well. I don't think I've ever actually used grid with it. The most I'll do is like write down like who's engaged with who and kind of give people rough ideas of where people are on the battlefield. But
my group loves Pathfinder because they like the uber tactical, super ass crunchy stuff, and I'm like, okay, that's their thing. But for me, one of the disadvantages for a game, if I look at them, like if I can't run it theater of the mind, I want that option to be a good, clean option. And trying to run a super crunchy like Pathfinder 3.0 or 3.5 is almost impossible in my opinion. It's really, I've done it, but it's really tough, and it has to be so hand wavy. I don't like it.
It's almost, it's designed for the map, the grid map more than other games are. But with Hyperborea, I think it's more of instead of a crunchy kind of character building or using your abilities in ways that are synchronized with other ones, it's more like actual tactical combat. Like, hey, we're in a closed space, and I'm gonna make a shield phalanx so the enemy can't get past me, and the guys behind me are going to use their spears to stab things. So kind of like more real world fighting type stuff than rules or feats, stuff like that.
Makes sense. I don't think this is a knock on it, but it feels like a lot of old school games that the skill of the player can be very helpful, right? If you're like, hey, as we bemoaned earlier, I look around, dude, come on, what exactly you're going for? I think because it's that old school style, you need to say those things like, I look underneath the throne, I slit the cushion, I look under stuff. This type of game is that type of over explanation, some people would say, or that detailed explanation, getting into the activity, really, chewing the scenery, so to say, is almost required to really get into it. Because once you're doing that, you're in that mode, right? And I think this game, it's got some cool stuff to it, But to really take advantage of that stuff, it also, I feel it encourages me. When I read it, I feel like I want to do that stuff. And maybe that's just Jeff's magic with how he's outlining stuff. But it's like, hey, man, describe what it is you want to do. And that's what the game master's there to help you figure out.
Yeah, for sure. I also love reading it brought me back to being a kid again, because I've never read a core book as much as I've read this just for fun.
It is a fun read. It is a good read, actually.
Yeah. This and DCC are like my things that I was just like, I will read this core book as for pleasure and leisure, and not just for like preparing for games.
Do you find, let's see here, the other thing from an old school perspective with the back to the monsters, let's talk about monsters for a second. So when I said it has Migo, so those are like Cthulhu, Lovecraftian type of stuff. It also has the apes, and I think, does this one have androids too? Does it have robots for potential bad guys? I can't remember.
Robots?
I don't have actually I have my core book right here. I can look, but
looking up the rules at the table. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
Hey, just slow and play down a little bit. Shut up.
But
I mean, we're talking like Great Race of
yeah,
Death,
they would
cool
would probably fall under the automaton.
Automatons?
Yeah,
okay.
Like kind of golem type things,
But I love the fact that the critters all, if I wanted to run this and I wanted to run it with 5e, right? If I love the setting, I'm like, yeah, but I want to do it with 5e. I think you would really, if you want to use 5e monsters, you're going to have to go through and parse. You're going to have to do a lot of legwork. And I think Talanian did a great job with the creatures in the monster manual. All are evocative and fit. They're wonderfully plucked from all the right pieces and parts of all that weird fiction that he loved, that he plugged into here. And I think that's the piece when I read it, even the Gazetteer, where sometimes Gazetteers I get kind of, glassy-eyed buzzing through them. But this one I felt like there's so many wonderful homages and pieces pulled directly from all this cool stuff. You're like, oh, I know where that's from. And even if that's not a thing you've done, if you haven't read all that stuff, it all fits.
Yeah.
Which I think can be really challenging, especially for, the main book is like 600 pages. It's heavy, but it's broken into chunks, right? So again, Monster Manual, Player's Guide, DM's Guide, Gazetteer, all that shit, magic items, all in one book. But all the monsters are wonderfully curated to help whenever you lay that into a group, it's going to enhance the experience. You don't have to say, well, it's a red cat, but I had to change it. Oh shit, it has a power that doesn't really work. Or, I didn't know that wouldn't fit, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It just, everything in it is wonderfully aligned with the setting and what he's trying to make you feel when you're playing it. And I always thought that was pretty cool.
And you do have some of your like traditional D&D monsters. You're not going to have like goblins and kobolds and hobgoblins, but there are orcs, but they're a little bit different. The orcs in this game are like essentially demonic spawn of the Picts. So they're a little bit different. But at the same time, you might have like the oozes, things that I think the D&D monsters that are going to fit more in a sword and sorcery genre than picking the high fantasy stuff. And then you got your definitely like Howard Lovecraft Smith influences.
When you run this, do you tend to run the pre-published Astonishing Swordsmen Adventures, or do you make your own? How are you doing it?
I do both. I think it's a lot like how I run a lot of my games is I'll put seeds in of things that I want to do, like homebrew or things I've come up with. And then other published adventures. I start like bringing in the rumors and hints beforehand, so it's not so forced when they go to the next one. So they might start hearing the things that could possibly be another adventure path. And I just kind of leave it to them. I think most of the stuff I've done on my own homebrew stuff has been in the city-state of Cromarium, because I think it's fun, and it's really easy to kind of riff on Lankmar and just use those as influence.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you do that, there's enough, the adventures that are out there. And the other thing that I like, the adventures remind me very much of the DCC stuff. They're not a $50 tome.
No.
If you're like Beneath the Comet and Rats in the Walls, they're very tight and condensed. They feel like those DCC size adventures and old school modules where you can buzz through it. And you're like, I got this. Boom. And you can read that in like a day or less and get ready to run that sucker.
Yeah, sure.
So I think that's an advantage to me, because then if you want to seed that stuff out there, you can talk about the Comet, the Rats in the Walls, the Charnel Pit. You can lay that stuff out there and almost a Wes Marches style say, look, wham, there's these potential things out there. go get it.
Yeah, where are you going
and
next?
see who wants to go grab onto it.
Yeah, and to do the comparison with DCC, the DCC adventure modules are usually around 10,000 words. And they're kind of designed, you can't play all of them in 4 hours, but they're almost designed to be like a one shot that get this adventure done. Whereas the Hyperborea adventures are almost double that in size. And the DCC adventures are very linear in a lot of ways. There are sometimes they have like a corresponding kind of hex crawl that might go with it. But I would say 99% of the ones for Hyperborea are like, here's the kind of crux of the adventure and here's the dungeon, but here's like the set, there'll be a hex around it of like exploration. And if you want to do like a sandboxy type thing as well.
That is true. I'd forgotten about that because it's the cool thing about those pre-published with that piece, not the cool, but one of the cool things is that you read it and it blows out a section of the hex on the map.
Yeah.
So you get this wonderful, cool, kick-ass map with the book. You lay the sucker out and you're like, wow, this is really cool. And it just does this beautiful little zero-in expansion of that area and then the number of hexes around it. So yeah, that is true. It doesn't just say, "Oh, here's a town. Straight out of this town is this dungeon, and that's it." By the way, the other 62 hexes around that, there's this, or other shit. If you want to go ahead and make up your own, you've got some, again, as you said, seeds you can play with that. So that makes sense. I've forgotten about that. That's a good piece.
And the adventures, when it comes down to like one of the big things in the OSR and the DIY type is like how usable is it at the table, right? Like, I just sit down and run this, and I think I've done it with his adventures. I do think they benefit from, just a quick read through. You don't have to memorize stuff. They're not like, it's not like trying to go through Tomb of Annihilation, right? And being like, there's no way you're ever going to read that and memorize anything. And it kind of can be overwhelming. But even with the shorter ones that Jeff puts out, you don't have to memorize it. It does benefit from like you kind of getting an idea of how the adventure is supposed to flow. But there are times I picked up a new one and be like, hey, we're sitting at the table, we're going to do this, and let's just see. And I don't feel like I have to do a lot of flipping around.
Do you find yourself running more one-shots or campaigns with it? I mean, one of the things that, for me, when I read it, I looked at it and I'm like, this is campaignable. And the reason that's a big thing for me is because if I come to the table with my home group and say, hey, I'm going to run a series of one-shots, they'd be like, no, fuck off. They want to run a campaign. They want to start from, like, if it's a level system, I go level 1 through 10 or something like that. They want to campaign through it. Have you been able to successfully pull off a campaign?
My campaigns, I haven't lasted years with this. I jump around playing different games all the time. I think my longest running Hyperborea campaign was probably like 6 months to a year. And that was us playing every week. I think they got to like 56 level. And I do a lot of one shots too, though, because I do run it a lot at cons. And there are you can either try and like condense one of the adventure modules, write your own thing, or just pick a piece of an adventure module, and run that in a con.
Oh, so that brought up another question for me: is when you're running at a con, are you tending to get people who've never played it, or people who are experienced? I mean, when you sit down at the table and you're going to run this at a con, are you tending to get people? Because I know you run it. You run at Gary Con. You run at Gen Con too, don't you?
No, Gen Con I run all DCC, but I run it at Total Con. I've run it at Gamehole, Gen Con. Gary Con. I get a mix. Like, there are some dudes who are like hardcore Hyperborea players. Some of the dudes who are actually, either in Jeff's group or know Jeff pretty well. And I get people who are very like, hey, I've seen this thing and I'm interested in it. I want to play it. And that's actually one of the most rewarding things when Jeff will tell me, he's like, hey man, I had some dude that was just like, played in your game and he came up raving about it and he bought a book. That's
awesome.
Yeah.
That's a cool feeling.
Yeah.
Are people who, I don't want to say, you don't have to be Tim Deschene to run this game, but what I want to say is when the people who've run through it, I mean, they're having a damn good time with you and the players and so forth, but are they intrigued because Tim's a damn good GM and the players were awesome, or are they liking what they see from rules and mechanics and setting? I'm wondering what they're telling you.
Yeah, I'm sure like someone who's not as of a polished dungeon master as I am, Brett, would. No, I think if you let the game do its thing, it kind of sells itself. Like, you just have to kind of like let the game do what it's supposed to be, and let the player characters shine and do their abilities. And then, they get to see what the game's about. But I don't have to do anything really super special. I think as long as you're not like, you just have to be like not a terrible, like
don't be a terrible game master.
Don't be the dude that says no to everything and is like reading from the module at the table, type stuff.
One of the things that the reason I'm asking that is because this will get to my magic question here. In DCC, one of the things that I've talked to people who played DCC for years and have never had or dealt with the Flojitsin thing where two mages. I've never, and they've said, fuck it, I don't even do that. I don't like that, or they've never experienced it, or they couldn't grok the rules or something. But one of the things that I found with DCC to help sell the system, you need to get in a fight because you got the critical charts and all that cool shit going on. But the other piece with it is the spells, because the spells in DCC, as Sean, I, and Jen Brinkman talked about ages back, each spell has just tons of crazy effects and differences and so forth. In this one, it's old school from the spells perspective. Do you find the spells from a definition? How do I say this? The BX spells I find are very tight. When I read the BX stuff, I'm like, that tells you exactly what it does. If you say, it does X, it creates a cube of water. You're like, it creates a cube of water. It doesn't necessarily say where. I can drop it on your head. I can do whatever. It allows you for creativity. Do you find these spells are so prescriptive that it's almost that, I'm going to get flack for this, but that, it's so boxed in where it can only specifically do a thing? Or do you feel that this has enough room to it so that if somebody wants to be creative with their casting and do I cast a cube of water, it doesn't say it falls, I cast it on the bad guy's head, and there he's got to either get out of it or drowned, or
I think that's in the spirit of the game. Like, it's the spell description, or if you've read, and they're very similar, like, so sleep in this is going to, like, no save, you're going to go to sleep type things, like, so it's very old school, Vancian style magic. But I think there's more. The game is designed for the game master to be able to run it the way they want. There's nothing in it that's going to say you can't do that.
Because that's one of the things I actually love about OSR style games is the kind of freedom to muck with stuff.
Yeah, like creative use of spells is way better than just using it as you think it's supposed to be used. You don't have a set prescribed. It only does this over this big, and you can do all sorts of crazier shit with it. So I like that. That's cool. So let me think. Sean, you got any questions here?
I do have a question I don't know if it's, I don't know if there's a huge nuance from the first edition to second edition, Tim. Was there a lot of change?
Nope. There are new classes, and it just turned into, like, from two different volumes to one. And I think Jeff did it mostly because of shipping. It was easier to ship a one book type thing than a box set. I do love my first edition stuff because it lays flat. It's like a nice spiral bound. I can only bring the DM's guide type stuff, the referee's manual if I want.
That was really cool. That was my first experience with a spiral bound rule book.
Yeah.
I fucking love it. I sat on my desk, I'm reading, I'm like, oh my God, it just lays flat. This is wonderful.
Yeah, it's awesome. But there's a couple of new character classes, but the rules are pretty much the rules, and it's just formatting, layout, more art, stuff like that. I was talking to Corey and Dave Wynn, like my first Gary Con I went to. We were sitting having a beer later in the evening, and we were talking about, they had one of the guys, I think it was Corey or Dave. Anyway, one of the two had played Astonishing Swordsmen. I'm like, oh, you guys love that. How'd it go? And he said, oh my God, we had to make characters at the table. It was so painful because half the players had never done it before. He said, like, so I think it was Dave. He's like, I knew what to do. Wham, wham, wham. He said that I helped half the rest of the table make characters. This feels like, because one of the things the old school systems will tell you is that you can make a character like that, right? You can just whip one up and so on. Now, that said, I think you need to still know the rules. If you don't know what you're doing, it can be tricky. But how do you find character gen in this? Is it simple, or, because I've heard people bitch that 5e is super hard, which I find crazy. I think with anything, it's the options. I think if you know what you want to play, or you're being limited by the game master, like maybe you're only playing the core 4 classes, it's character creation does not take very long. It's a little bit more in depth than BX because it has more of the AD&D style of, like, your
race and class.
Well, like, or that, and your strength, like, might give you a different bonus to hit as to damage. It's not just a flat +3 if you have an 18, right? There's a couple of different things. So I think like a straight up newbie might have a little, like, analysis paralysis in it. It's not like doing a convention of, like, maybe you don't have all experienced players making characters at the table is probably not. I've done it with Swords and Wizardry before, and it takes 5 minutes, but, like, I think it would take a little bit of time in Astonishing Swordsman. But if you have a bunch of dudes who know what they want to play and they've played a lot, it goes by quick.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, I think you're right. Because I look at the classes, even with you look at different versions of human, like, oh, I want to be an Atlantean, I want to be an Amazonian. Okay, cool. I'll be a fighter, subtype. And there's a lot. I think one of the cool things, to your point, when you said it kind of has that second edition feel to it, where it took the extra different stuff from some of the second edition splat books, like, hey, here's different variations of fighter. And it gives you those various subclasses. And I've said this before, even tonight, but it's just, they're tight in that each class, as you said, has those very class specific powers that are just for them.
Yep.
Which are really cool, which gives you a chance to shine. When you run into that thing, no one else happens to have sleight of hand. No one else happens to be able to pick locks. No one else happens to be able to have this barbarian thing or this necromancer thing. That's the thing they have, and they alone. And that's pretty cool because, and for me anyway, yeah, I look at that and I'm like, wow, that will help me as a game master running a campaign or an adventure, because if I know who's going to be there, I'm like, oh, I can gear stuff if I feel like it. That's going to hit everybody's high points pretty, not easily, but it's going to give them all a chance because I know what they're bringing to the table because they've all got individual stuff.
Yeah, and Jeff has a part in the book too that talks about, if it's physically, if it's something that's like, there's nothing like going to actually stop you from trying to do something, but if it's in the purview of another character class, you should never really have more than like a 1 in 6 chance of doing it. So that way you're not kind of like stepping on the toes of, so like maybe you're a dexterous dude, but you're not the thief, and it comes time to like open locks. That's really that's the thief's job. But if you don't happen to have one, or maybe you're trying to do it on your own, they failed, or you're never going to have more than like that 1 in 6 chance to like really to do that thing. So there's always that option. There's always a possibility, but
yeah, you could pull it off, but it's kind of like, look, man, here's the deal. You try that, it's going to be only 1 in 6, as good as you can get. Okay, that's a good point. I like that.
So yeah, I would say like one thing is like what I love about the game too is like I think I said during the show notes is it reminds me. First of all, I got into the game because of DCC. Tim Callahan, who's one of the Goodman Games writers, was like, "Dude, you have to get this game." And I saw the first edition art. Ian Bagley stuff is like really evocative, and it just drew me in. So I played with Tim at TotalCon in like 2015 or 16. And I was like, oh my God, I love this game. And I think I'd already bought it, but I wasn't really sure. Like, all right, let me try it out first. And it was like, from there on I was sold. And it's gone. And like I said, it's like the community is very similar to how DCC started, like a very small, but like passionate, friendly community. And the dudes that you talk to in the forums are pretty awesome. You get a core group. And I'm a Johnny come lately. Like, I think I started, like I said, I think it had been out for like 3 years before I came on. So it's kind of funny, like I'm the dude here, but the one thing I am is I'm very energetic and enthusiastic about the games that I love. So I find myself sometimes being like the spokesman.
That's why we have you here, Tim.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I thought it would be because I'm so handsome, but then I realized we're a podcast.
Well, hey, we get bonus. It's a bonus.
Yeah.
Sean's got a face for radio. That's why we just podcast.
No, dude, I'm a bald dude. He's got a good set of hair right there. That's a So also it's just like simple. Like I said, if you're into DCC, you got to check this game out. And there's a lot of crossover too. Like I think maybe there's a little less going the other way because if you're into Hyperborea and because you're into old school D&D as well, and then sometimes DCC could be like too loosey goosey for people.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Like people ask me, like, "Well, how do you choose?" And it's like, well, when I want to play like D&D, I pick Hyperborea, and when I want to play DCC, we play DCC. Yeah,
yeah, it's got its own. I think Dungeon Crawl Classics really has its own thing. I don't find another game that way. Oh, that's like DCC. You know what I mean? The closest thing I can think of is Dark Trails. That's close, but it's Beatty's still his own thing, but it's still DCC feels like DCC. And there's no way when I read Astonishing Swordsmen, I didn't go, oh, this is a DCC ripoff. Oh, it feels very unique. So from a cost perspective, I think that's really cool. And Sean will have a link in the notes, but it's $19 for the complete second edition in PDF.
Yeah.
I mean, That's not bad. Not bad at all.
And I will say, I think I use my PDF more at the table than I do, because I have the only second edition book I have is a really nice foil autographed numbered cover.
Yep. Which number do you have?
I don't even know. I gotta go look at it.
I'm number 70 of 150.
I was bringing that to like cons, which is insane. People are like, oh my God, you're bringing that?
Why are you doing it?
It's also like 50 pounds. So like bringing that, like, so I use my PDF a lot. Like that's pretty much what I run the game out of. So yeah, for $20 is a steal. And he also has like lots of sales during the year where you can snag it for like $10, $5 sometimes. It's well worth it.
I think he's always at GaryCon. So if you're going to be at GaryCon, you can check him out there. He's always there. Northwind Adventures is the company that puts it out. We'll have a link in the show notes to the actual site. But if you go to DriveThruRPG and you check out Northwind Adventures, you can see all the different stuff he's got out there. And Jeff runs a lot of really cool Kickstarters to get things going. But there's a character name generator. You got the rule book. You got the player's manual. Is the $12 PDF out there. So when we talk about this massive heavy duty tome, if you like Tim said, I first read this, I bought it in PDF, the first edition version of it, just to see if I would like it before I get a hard copy. But you can get a decent map out there for $3. The adventures, they're cheap as hell, in my opinion. I mean, Charnel Pit of the Sightless Serpent, that was what I was talking about. That's $4. Fane of the Forgotten Coiled Goddess, $10. I mean, they're good adventures and they're pretty darn handy. So they're cool stuff. Yeah,
for $10, you're going to get like easy 3 or 4 sessions out of them for the most part. I put them on fast forward when I run them at conventions, but they're good little like mini campaigns.
I think the other thing, the reason when I first read the book, I'm like, I want to get at least a couple adventures. And the reason I did was because I wanted to make sure that when I set up an adventure for myself, I understood kind of how Jeff was doing it. I guess I wanted to do it right, and I didn't want to find myself slipping and turning it into a regular, quote unquote, regular D&D game. I want to make sure I kind of stay true, because I wanted to run it in the Hyperborea setting. I really wanted to do that. And I think one way to do that is kind of like the first time my buddies and I played Greyhawk, we played Greyhawk Adventures stuff that was set in that setting where it uses your Infundi, it has the right gods and the right everything. Nobody slipped and thought it was something else, or, made reference to something. It really helped to contain. And by reading those adventures, they really kind of get my brain locked into, this is how a good Astonishing Swordsman adventure is set up. Even if I read one, I don't know, Jeff, I don't know if I like the flow, I might change this, which, I mean, we all do to stuff. But the core, the feel of it is all right there. All the right level of weirdness, the right cool options, all that stuff is all in all of those adventures. I think they're all really well done.
And laser guns for Sean.
Laser guns for Sean.
It's Barrier Peaks all day, baby.
Oh, God.
Non-stop.
Yeah.
Autonomous guns with laser arms.
Sounds
chain
great.
Swords.
I will block that part out.
Tim, did I miss anything when we chatted through this, or did we hit all the points?
No, I mean, this is something we could talk about forever. But I think we hit like the majority. Like if you're someone that's really into like the Weird Tales literature, it's like right up your alley. Like you're going to see things in the Gazetteer that like, oh man, I know where this came from. This is really cool.
I'll tell you the other thing, for my money in the OSR space, this is one of the more original settings that's tightly tied into a rule set. I like Swords and Wizardry. I like Osric. I've seen Labyrinth Lord and so on and so forth. I think this is one of the best ones out there.
Yeah, I agree.
I really do. It's the total package of all the cool stuff all wrapped in. Not only good tight rules, spells, mechanics, blah blah blah, that stuff. The Gazetteer, the Monster Manual, it's all laid out right there. Man, in this space, I'm sure somebody out there is going to absolutely freaking disagree with us here, but I think this is the best one.
I think one of the things that people, like the first complaint you see is because, and we brought that up earlier, was the Ascending Armor class. And one, it's not that hard. There is a matrix on the bottom of the character sheet. I mean, I learned THAC0 when I was 11, so it can't be that difficult.
Exactly.
And I'm not a very smart person. Like I am of average intelligence. Like that.
I was an English major in college, and I learned THAC0. Come on, kids.
Yes, everybody can learn it. Yes, everybody can do it.
But Sean, it's really easy. You can do the target 20 method. It's super easy. You take your die roll, you add all your modifiers in, you add your character's fighting ability and the enemy's armor class, and if it's over 20, you hit.
See? Just simple addition.
See, now that's a different method, though. That's like...
I like that method.
You know what I'm saying? It's not roll.
No, I hear you.
Yeah.
But because of the fact that it has descending AC, it makes it so if you have a lot of classic adventures that you want to plug in, like I ran at one GaryCon, I ran 2 sessions of B4, the Lost City, in Hyperborea, and I didn't have to do anything. You know what I mean? Like it's hit dice and armor class, and it matches up, and it's just like, hey, we ran the Lost City. It was awesome.
That's one thing that does appeal to me about something like AS&SH is that maybe component. Because I doubt I would probably use the native setting as much, because I'm just not... I have never been a Howard fan, or I just haven't.
Oh, if that's on your shtick, yeah. I get that. That makes sense.
The classics do have like the nostalgia piece does hit home on occasion, and there is times where I'm like, oh, I'm going to bust out Pharaoh, or I'm going to bust out, the Lizard, Tomb of the Lizard King, or whatever module, and I don't want to do a lot of conversion bullshit. And so something like this, where you're talking about, Tim, it's really easy to convert because all the numbers are the same, but it's maybe smoother. Because, Brett, you and I have talked about how AD&D rule-wise and reading it and grokking it is, I just don't think it's the best.
If you want to learn first edition AD&D, you read Astonishing Swordsmen or Osric. That will teach you as closest to that core, in my opinion, as you can get. And Osric is okay. Osric is okay from a read, but from a raw entertainment perspective and feeling like you're being entertained and reading it, not even realizing how deep you are into this book, Astonishing Swordsman carries that easily.
Yeah. So I mean, so part of me is like, okay, great. I'll pick it up and use it for what it is for me personally. And then, which would be probably some of those older module one shot, or, I mean, whether it's a campaign or not. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I see and appreciate that component of the game that.
Well, that's the core pieces of it. The rules, the spells, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I get you.
Yeah. I don't know.
Cool,
Maybe
man.
I'm not articulating myself very well.
No, I get what you're saying.
Which is, why would I start after 270 episodes? Just saying. Like, what the hell you guys expect out there? God damn it. All right. No, that's
all
good.
right.
Maybe I will pick it up. I don't have it. I don't own it yet.
Yeah, pick up a PDF of it. It's a couple bucks there, and you buzz through it. If nothing else, next time we get a chance to get a crew together, if Swick or somebody's in town, I'll run it. Be a good opportunity. I need to get the fucker to the table and run it, because I've got a shelf full of this awesome stuff, and I have yet to use it. And I've been cleaning out game systems on my shelf for a while. I'm like, I'm never gonna run this. This is stupid. Why did I buy this? And this one is always in the keep pile, because I love it, and there's no way I'm getting rid of it.
Well, I also signed up to run fewer games this year at GaryCon. Instead of doing like 24 or 30 hours of games, I'm maybe running 8.
Wow!
So I will have plenty of time off books to run some Hyperborea for those who are interested.
See, no, Sean.
Maybe we'll get a gaming and BS game going.
There we go. We just got to get Sean to go.
I would be honored.
Dude, just show up and we'll play in the lobby.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You might not have a frickin' choice. Hey, Skip Williams, I feel your pain, buddy, but damn. I want to play on the sidewalk. Hey, our open gaming area. It's out. See the lobby? Go through those doors. Out underneath the canopy. There's a parking lot. Oh, but watch out, because the parking lot's too full, too.
That's icy.
I rip on Gary Con. Those guys are trying to do a bang up job, but they're having capacity issues.
It's a tough gig, man.
It's hard being. It's one of my favorite. It is, if not my favorite con, I would say one of my favorite cons. And a con that good's only going to draw more people, and it just sucks for those of us. I mean, I've only been to 5 now. But I think about Jim Scatch, who's been to every single one, or some of the other guys like that. Like they've seen their beloved small con turn into like this giant monster.
Oh my God, there's 1,000 people here.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Maybe they cap it, which would be unfortunate. But I think for experience-wise,
or you got to jack.
Or
there's
you
multiple
jack
ways
up the prices.
Price.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can price people out. There's a lot of there's no good. Where you find a different location?
No,
I don't know.
No, Luke.
I don't know, man.
I know Luke's pretty adamant to keep it in Lake Geneva.
I heard that guy will just he
would rather cap it, I think, than
yeah. Anyways,
Oh well. Okay.
go on for hours.
Off we go.
All right. Well,
Die roll?
Die roll. You just kind of set them all, didn't you?
Oh yeah. So we got links to the PDF for Astonishing Swordsmen Sorcerers of Hyperborea. We have links to the book out on Noble Knight, if you're a Noble Knight shopper, and if you're not, why not? They have good deals. Hyperborea.tv, the official site, that's out there, and we also have a Clark Ashton Smith Amazon link out there for folks. If you're into it, Clark Ashton Smith, there are a number of different collected audiobooks, and I picked up some of those because I have an hour in and hour home drive, and I've listened to a bunch of them. Some of them, like, oh my God, I can't stand the story was stupid. There's some really good stuff within that stuff, though. That's good. It's good stuff. Tim, you got anything you want to call out?
Just that my friend Joey Royale, as he's known on the internet in the DCC community, he and I are putting out a zine for Zine Quest. It's called One of Us. It is for the Dungeon Crawl Classics role-playing game system, where you are playing a troupe of essentially carnies and circus folk in a post-apocalyptic Dust Bowl setting. If you like Carnival, actually this is all Joey, man. Joey was the one that wrote it. I'm just kind of organizing everything for him. But if you like Carnival and like kind of dark horror type stuff,
yeah, there's total, like, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of shit that freaks me out about carnivals and festivals and all that. Like, yeah, man, I get it.
Awesome. That's
so
cool.
Did you have a link? Did you want?
I don't have the link yet because the Kickstarter page is not live. But once you get
it, pass it to us, man, so we can share that around. We gotta get that up there
for sure. And we got
Sweet.
I'm really excited because I got some really cool people doing art. Whether or not it sucks, it's going to be pretty.
Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's what when I like Matt Morrow did good stuff for my Avalon book. So I'm like, even if everyone thinks my ideas are stupid as hell, they're like, the art looks great. Like, yeah, that'll just be that's all I needed.
Yeah, I think I went a little overboard on the art budget for a zine, but I was like, my art is one of the number one things that draws me to games. So if I was going to put something out, I wanted to have art that I was going to love and be proud of. So I got some cool people doing art for us.
Cool.
Nothing wrong with that thinking.
Sweet, man.
Yeah, Tim, thanks for being on the show, buddy.
Man, thank you guys. The once a year seeing you dudes, and maybe not even once for Sean, since he's like be a slacker, but either way, I love you dudes. Good to see you.
You too, man.
I get this guy on the show, and this is the grief I get. I don't understand.
Well, we should have heard what we said before we started recording. It was even worse.
Yeah, I have the face for grief, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
All right.
You're just too handsome.
Oh, pfft. All right. Well, let's sign off for this sucker.
All right.
Thanks for Tim for being on the show. Thanks for people who have written in. Thanks for listening. Check out the links in the show notes. And this is Sean.
And I'm Brett. Good night, good game and all.
This episode of Gaming and BS brought to you with the help from the following BSers: Graham Miner, Corey Wynn, Hawk Sparrow, Aaron Aurelia, Tony Sugarloaf Baker, Curtis Takahashi, Joe Swick, Larry Hout, Mark Tasaka, Pure Mongrel, Chris Steele, Ron Bishop, Thomas Hook, Wayne Humphrey, Craig, Brandon Barnes, Laramie Wall, Dan LaValle, Jason Hobbs, Sky, Old School DM, Perry Basor, Michael Dinos, Jim Fitzpatrick, Christopher Gray, Bruce Cunnington, John Kayward, Corey Gonzalez, Eileen Barnes, Robert Nemeth, Niall Diamond, Howard Bishop, Mark Anthony Benedetti, Eric Salzweedle, The Closet Gamer, Jeff Goad, Aaron Coleman, Ray Otis, C.W. Mellencamp, Craig Huber, Rich Wishon, Old Scouser Roleplaying, Jared Rasher, Andy Hall, David F. Baylog, Harrigan, Melissa Bashinsky, Brian Rumble, Henry Newcomb, Eric Telvola, Huss Carl, Roger Braslett, Mark Sohm, Andy Olson, Eric Avia, Ron Blessing, Jeff Seifert, Ghost GM, Mike Hess Jr., Chad Glayman, Finolf, Josh Wallace, and Mirko Froelich. For ways to support the show, head over to gamingandbs.com/support-us. Thanks, BSers. This has been a Litterbox Studio production.